Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us to stay curious on an important day in space and astronomy history today, as 7 years ago, the NASA New Horizons spacecraft swooped by Pluto, which is now a dwarf planet, but it was, of course, the ninth planet of the solar system after it was discovered in 1930 by Mr. Clyde Tombaugh. And behind me is an incredible photograph of these mountains on Pluto made of nitrogen at 350 below zero, floating on a slushy little lake over here, off my shoulder on here, on there. And as I fixed my hair, I've been out in the wind there on a busy day here at the American Space Museum. And we're so glad that you're with us today to celebrate what I call Planet Palooza, because we're going to find out that Pluto has a heart of a planet if it's not just a planet. But many of us out there are always going to think that Pluto's a planet, and it doesn't matter because it is one of the most fascinating objects in the solar system. Though smaller than our moon, it has a dynamic atmosphere. Look at the layers of the atmosphere there in this photograph. And we will never see Pluto again in our lifetimes. Certainly not my lifetime. You probably got to be about under 30 before we will have another spacecraft go by Pluto. And we'll tell you why that was such a long journey for New Horizons there. But Marty Winkle, my uh, co-producer for over 2 years on Stay Curious, is here behind our Streamlabs computer console, bringing you a what we feel is now an upgraded and solid version of Stay Curious. So tell your friends to like us on Facebook, watch us on YouTube, and share us and subscribe to us on their social media channels. So we're going to kick it off here a little bit with old poor Pluto, kicked out of the Planet Club. And why did that happen? Well, basically because it is in an orbit that other planets aren't in. Think of a pie plate or just a saucer plate that you eat off of. Pluto's orbit goes above and below that plate. You know, I have a plate here in my hand, Marty. So it goes above and below it instead of staying in within a few degrees of the plane of the orbit around the sun. It also, there's other objects that are some even bigger than Pluto that occupy an area called the Kuiper Belt. This is the 4 billion to 12 billion mile region beyond Neptune. Neptune's about 2 billion. In fact, in the 1980s, Pluto's orbit cut inside of Neptune's and was actually closer to the sun than Neptune was. So it's an anomaly, but in our hearts, Pluto is a planet, and you're gonna. It's in our heart because the discovery by Clyde Tombaugh was very difficult back almost 100 years ago in 1930. So that's why Pluto's not a planet. That you're going to see in a moment that we could classify 10 or 15 other objects as a planet because they're in the same type of orbits like Pluto. But this Planet Palooza is to have a lot of fun and clear up a little bit about the enigma of Pluto. We'll never see images like these again. All right, so this is what's going to define Pluto for the next half a century for sure. There's no other Pluto missions on the drawing board. And so let's celebrate this weird and wacky planet named after Walt Disney's dog. All right, but really it was named after the underworld Pluto, the Roman caretaker of Hades. So Vesta and Sirius are in the asteroid belt, and Sirius is also a dwarf planet because it has an atmosphere and it doesn't clear out any of its space. Pluto has other objects in near its orbit, so a planet truly clears out a path around it there. But these are some of the asteroids and their comparative sizes to the moon. There's the moon behind me. All right. So Pluto's about half the size of the moon, a little over 1,200 miles across, and Sirius is half the size of Pluto. One day we'll talk about Sirius. It is got dried up ammonia lakes on it. We know it had water on it. Vesta is very bright, and you can see it from time to time from your backyard, as you can Sirius. Pluto, you're not going to see Pluto without a big telescope, and then you're only going to see its movement to convince you that that star is indeed Pluto. Its movement you'll record, which I have with my pencil over a week period. You can see that it's moved. And here's the size again. Oh, I'm in the way there, Marty. Pluto's behind me with its. I guess he can't do anything about that except me move maybe a little this way there. There we go. There's Pluto, and Karan, Charon, is Pluto's moon. All right, you don't have to move that, Marty. That's good. That's good. And but you get an idea of that Pluto is very small and tiny compared to the Earth. All right. Keith Soul says, who's an astronomer, planet, minor planet, it's still a planet, is what Keith says. And he's old school like me, Keith. I agree with you. And that's why we're going to have some fun with it today here on Stay Curious. There is the, I'm blocking that. All right, I'm more comfortable here. There's the New Horizons spacecraft, all right. Not Marty's fault. We're doing good here. We want to show you the pictures as big as they can with the impression of what Pluto is going to look like. They thought it would be an icy ball, maybe with some features on it, but they expected a lot more cratering on it. 10 years and 3 billion miles was the journey for the New Horizons spacecraft, launched from Kennedy Space Center, or Cape Canaveral, it arrived there in 2015, so it was 2005 when it was launched towards Pluto on this journey. And it got a gravitational assist from Jupiter along the way and photographed some, I think, a couple interesting asteroids along the way. But what it did was it hit it kind of went through a bullseye orbit as if Pluto, and you see the orbits of its very small moons. Charon is about half its size, like the Earth and the Moon. It is a dual planet, Pluto and Charon are. But Styx is another small moon, Kerbos, Hydra, and Nix. And a couple of those moons, Nix and Hydra, are only a couple miles across. And they were discovered in the search during this time here. So basically just a few hours going 30,000 miles an hour, zooming by, taking photographs. Think how dark it is, okay, where Pluto is. The sun, you don't need shades, all right? It's just a really bright star in the sky. Of course, it's going to be the brightest star in the sky, but it'll barely cast a shadow on Pluto. So they had to take long time exposures. Very technical, this mission. And yet it was with technology that was at least 10 years old when it reached its destination. And new technology would have, like CCD photography advances, would have made it easier to photograph these images. So you dumped me years ago, now you drive by my house real slow. That's what this meme's all about. And there is the heart of Pluto, the classic photo of it. Just like dumping an old girlfriend, Marty, you got to drive by and see what's going on. So in 2006, you're not a planet, but in 2015, hey, I'm gonna come by anyway. So this is the man, Mr. Clyde Tombaugh. Grew up in Nebraska, a stargazing nut like myself since a little boy. Made his own telescopes, and then went out to the Percival Lowell, a wonderful, famous astronomer who promoted the canals of Mars 100 years ago. In 1900, 1902, 3 to 10, he published 3 books that he thought Mars was a dying civilization lived there and was trying to send us signals, and the canals were their waterways to sustain their dying cities. And people bought into that. And Marty, Percival Lowell was like the Stephen Hawking's astrophysicist of the day, where people would buy his book. Everyone would buy his book. Most nobody would read it, but you'd go over to a cocktail party and say, hey, I see you got Stephen Hawking's book up there. And I forget what that was called. But you'd say, hey, I see you got Percival Lowell's Mars as an Abode for Life on your shelf there. And so very popular guy. But this is Clyde Tombaugh, who had the guts to go up and ask for a job. And he says, yes, I'm looking for Planet X. My calculations show that the planet Neptune's orbit is being disturbed or perturbed. It's not exactly where it should be all the time. There's got to be another planet pulling on it. And he had it all figured out where he thought it was. And Clyde Tombaugh would take pictures 6 months apart of the same region of the sky, because if something had moved, you would see it move by a parallax of being on one side of the Earth or the other 6 months later, looking at the same object. And in the constellation Gemini, that is where Clyde Tombaugh found with these famous plates on January 23rd, and then the other one was January 29th, about a week apart, 1930. And the arrows point to a star that is the planet Pluto. And he knew by the orbit that it was so far away it couldn't be an asteroid, because it would be a quicker movement and so forth. So even 100 years ago, we could figure out a lot of things, folks. So, but this was not announced to the world until March 14th, 1930. Here's the New York Times: ninth planet discovered on the edge of the solar system, first found in 84 years, which was Neptune. And they actually thought it was larger than the Earth to begin with. They didn't understand. They thought that it was just so far away, it was reflecting light that made that it was bigger than Earth. And but nonetheless, Planet X was found, and Pluto was its name. Here's a contrast of you amateur astronomers out there. The New York Times reporting that the Pluto has mountains, and there's just an amazing scientist, a toy store, and it is, because we still don't understand a lot what's going on there. In 7 years, we wish we could see how things changed. Yet we just had an hour to whiz by it and take these fabulous pictures. You know, on the right behind me here is the first photo of Mars surface transmitted 50 years later, almost to the day. This was July 17th, 1965, when I was a paper boy and delivered this newspaper that showed Mars was cratered, didn't have any forests or lakes or anything like that. A big disappointment in 1965 to see these images of Mars looking more like the moon than it did Earth, as we had hoped. And so Percival Lowell's Canals died. The day the music died for them was July 17th, 1965. And then Pluto, wow, we're resurrected. Look at the gorgeousness of it. And it makes you, it is one of the most dynamic objects in the solar system. We'll put it that way. There's the telescope used to discover Pluto at Flagstaff, Arizona. You can see the chair that and a fan there, give you a proportion. There's a white fan underneath there. But it was they took photographic plates, not film. And there is old Mr. Clyde Tombaugh in later years. And I proudly own this poster of Mr. Clyde. There he is there. And he signed it there for me. Where he put the discovery part is faded out. But there's a picture of our astronomy club at the Bristol, Tennessee Astronomy Club at King College in Bristol, Tennessee. A lot of good friends are now gone from that picture. But old Clyde did in about 1996, I think, sort of a around the country last hurrah. He was not in failing health, but he knew his time was coming, being in his 80s, and he wanted to promote Pluto. And this was before it got demoted. So very warm individual, nice man. He had a little osteoporosis in his later years, which bent him over. But he was he perfected a lot of optical. He went into optics, and he perfected optics, Marty, for the range telescopes that photographed the rockets in New Mexico, there at the Edwards Air Force Base in Dryden and Vandenberg. So a really wonderful guy. And his ashes actually were on the New Horizons when it went by. This was the best view from the Hubble telescope of Pluto and Charon and Nix and Hydra there, two of its many moons. And then enhanced views of the Hubble gave us only this best look at it. We could see light and dark areas on it, but even the Hubble telescope with all those fantastic images you see, Pluto is so far away at 4 billion miles and so small at half the size of our moon, which, 1,200 miles, Marty. We've driven that in a day lots of times. That's about from here to New York City, I think. Here, so even the Hubble telescope couldn't pull out much details. But there's the details, a collage of images taken that show you the actual colors, the way Pluto could look to the naked eye. And this is just one part of its hemisphere. We didn't get to see half of Pluto, okay, but the half we saw was just astonishing. The high areas are the reddish areas, all right, and this is nitrogen at 350 degrees below zero, all right. And again, look at this incredible image of layers of atmosphere. Pluto has an atmosphere. Above my head here is a slushy pond-like lake that is on the shores of these mountains that are pushed up. We don't see hardly any craters on the planet at all, which tells you what? It's fresh. Because craters are on everybody in the solar system. Even far away as Pluto, there's plenty of debris crashes into it. But obviously its atmosphere has burned up some of it, and the rejuvenation of this nitrogen surface has taken away all but a few craters. This entire ice flow here, the size of I don't know, a few hundred miles across there. Where's the kilometers? I'm they're pointing, the arrows are nitrogen ice flows, it shows, and there are these polygonal cells that are freezing up, and we see this in the Great Lakes. We see this in other areas around the world here. There's a nitrogen ice flow, it's pointing out. So we know that nitrogen is flowing like water. The nitrogen we breathe in our atmosphere, which our atmosphere on Earth is about 70% nitrogen and 29% oxygen, is what makes it special and adaptable to humans. This nitrogen that I'm breathing, if I could freeze it at 350 degrees, this is what we get, Pluto. Here is the names have been informally named. They called that bright heart area the Tomball region. Of course, you're going to name the most prominent feature after the man that discovered it. And you got Voyager, you got all kinds of allusion to some science fiction in there. Chuluth, Regio, that's kind of cool. That's H.P. Lovecraft, the horror writer, contemporary of Poe. The Chuluth mythos, a whole bizarre 3-4-dimensional world this guy created, and so on and so forth. So we love putting names on things so we can identify them and scientists can talk about them together. Here's another look at this incredible nitrogen shoreline in these polygonal cells of slushy nitrogen bubbling up, we think, from a warmer center. And here are the mountain ranges, all right, captured there. And what they actually think are right here, Marty, here and here are volcanoes, ice volcanoes, okay? They call them cryovolcanoes because this is what they look like on a couple planets that orbit Uranus and Neptune. And there's some stuff that looks like it was flopped out recently. Recent time in planetary time is just a few thousand years. And there's another edge of the enhanced view of Pluto. Incredible. Just a great world that unfortunately, we're never going to see again. But if it looks like a planet and walks like a planet and talks like a planet, right, Keith Sewell? Yep, you're right. We both think it's a planet, all right. And I'm sure some of you agree with us out there. Here again, comparison to Earth, it's small. That's one of the side things. But man, is it dynamic, like I've shown you. And look at Karan, and it's moon Karan and the top of Karan there, okay? See that dark spot there? They think this is caused by an interaction between Pluto It's low gravity and it's icy volcanoes erupting, and there might be a magnetic field around Karan. We're not sure, but it lands on the top of Karan, material from Pluto, on there, which at 736-mile radius, you see it's 1,400 miles across. So Karan is only about 700 miles across, and yet here are the only images mankind is going to see of these. I guarantee you, Marty, for 50 years. So a little quiz. Two of these objects are moons of Pluto, and one's a raisinette. Which one's the raisinette, Marty?
Middle?
The middle? No. What do you say out there, Carlton Bailey? I know you're watching. It's the one on the above my head. There's the raisinette. The other two are moons of those tiny moons of Pluto. So, well, we hope that you've all enjoyed a little fun today. Mark Usiak, thank you for watching. Tom Usiak, his big brother, is now seen with real good eyes. Thank you, Tom. Dave Stange and Christopher Mick, we appreciate you guys watching us all the time like you do, and telling your friends too, because our number's growing. If you didn't see our program yesterday on with Terry White, the manager of the orbital processing facility, go back and see that. It's one of the most watched we've had in a long time. We also thank Chalid Zan watching, Mark Kirkman. He likes our programs, Carol Kavanaugh, Yvette Wingold, George Mingaria, and Perry Hall. Thank you all for watching. And I know Andrew Olivia's watching, and he's in Cocoa. And Scott Polk from Australia, Marty. Scott wished Terry White a birthday all the way. Happy birthday, all the way from Australia. Thank you for watching, Scott. And we know that Ophelia's watching in France. We to you, young lady. So there's Pluto and Karan, okay, in there. And it's just, I hope we've convinced you a little bit that I don't know if the International Astronomical Union that decides all these things will reconsider Pluto as a planet again. Really, scientifically, it's in a class that it belongs called a dwarf planet. It's got the word planet. It's dwarf, okay, definitely small. But it's so doggone unique, and to have stripped it of that planetary heritage, I'll go to my grave with my buddy Clyde Tombaugh here signing my poster that it's a planet on there. But and it's also gorgeous when we left and New Horizons turned around and took a long exposure of sunlight coming through a violet-looking atmosphere of Pluto. So that's why I've campaigned a little bit today to free Pluto, equal gravity for all planets, okay? But there's some that disagree, all right? And they're pretty vocal out there, all right? Mr. Tyson and of course, Mr. Nye, they stand by and firm that Pluto's not a planet. But hey, we'll never forget, right? That's right. So we hope that you've enjoyed our little planet Pluto Palooza here today. And on behalf of the American Space Museum, we're so glad that you're here with us today. We will have Triple T tomorrow to give us some tales from the White Room. Thank you, Marty, for a good job today. I'm going to just remind everybody that we're going to be closed. The museum will be closed next Monday, July 18th, for 3 weeks. We're going to reopen August 8th with brand new floors, a new conference room, and some other new renovations going on here at your favorite nonprofit, the American Space Museum.
Launch tonight.
What?
Launch tonight.
Marty's reminding me there's a launch tonight at 8:44. A cargo ship is going to be launched from pad, not sure which pad, Marty, 40 or 39A, 40. 40, which if you're on the Space Coast here, that's south of the VAB. I'll be out there watching it, and you can probably, because it's a cargo ship to the ISS, NASA TV will have it. So thank you, Marty, for reminding me of that. And so with that said, I want to remind everybody, Triple T will be here tomorrow. Until then, I'm Marquette saying, stay tuned for a lot of fun tomorrow with Triple T, because he's going to bridge the space between us.